I'm Ted Erekson, and I'm here at the Cache Valley Storytelling Festival. This is our first year. We're going to do it for years to come, right here in North Logan City. And my wife and I are big supporters of this. We're the Nutmeg Company. I'm the nut, she's the meg, and we sell stories, we sell books, we sell artwork, all sorts of fun things. But this is a great opportunity for family, friends, and loved ones to learn about each other and just to communicate. Thanks.
These are my grandkids, Toad and Yeti and Og. Their parents call them something else, but that's what I call them. I am so glad that my mom and dad are here tonight. They're awesome. I was kind of hoping my mom wasn't here because she's going to yell out and correct me in this story. Because she remembers differently than I remember. Abraham Lincoln said something to the effect that I'm the man I am today because of my angel mother. And I remember when I was a small boy, when she'd give me a bath, and that smell of Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo that wasn't actually tearless if it got in your eyes. But as she'd rinse that out in the tub, I remember her soft, loving voice as she told me the story of the princess and the golden ball and the frog in the well that would get the ball out only if she promised to kiss him, and he became a frog prince. And I think to this day that's why I'm a storyteller at heart. But things changed as I grew. More me than her. Me and my brother Dave got into a lot of trouble. And I know you kids today may think this is awful, but we deserved it. My mom liked to use our belts. Not to make origami or anything like that. But when we got in some real serious trouble, she'd come out, she'd find our belts, and she'd give us a whipping. One night, me and Dave had gotten into some pretty serious trouble, and we hid our belts. Which infuriated my mom even more. She had a vein in their forehead. In fact, to this day, I still think my real name is pronounced with your teeth gritted. Edward Erekson. I'd go to school and they'd read my name and I said, no, it's pronounced like this. Edward Erekson. And it was us. And we hid the belts and she came in looking for our belts and she couldn't find them. She left the room. Me and Dave were like, and she came back with a brush, a fuller brush. And they had bristles like nails on them. And she dropped our trowel and she hit us till we bleed. Now remember, I was a kid. This is my memory. And I told this story to my kids, Nanette. I gathered them at the table and I told them about how Grandma Lou with that bristle brush would beat our bare butts till they bled. And as my kids got older, they finally got up the courage. We were visiting. They said, Grandma, is it true that you beat our dad's bare butt with a brush until it bled? And my mom, Grandma Lou, looked at him lovingly and said, do I look like a woman that would do such a thing? And I said, yes, you do! I was 4 years old, my brother Dave was 5. I was 4, he was 5, 4 and 5. And to this day, Dave is still 1 year older than I am. I was 4, he was 5, and we both got strep throat. How many have had strep throat? Now you got the swollen glands, the sore throat, the sweat from the fevers. It was miserable. And Mom came into our room. We slept in the same room, bunk beds. Mom came in and said, we're going to go see Dr. Giddings at the Olympus Clinic. Me and Dave loved going to the Olympus Clinic because every time you went, you got a sucker, and that sucker made everything worth it. But they were stupid suckers. Looking back as a parent, they were stupid, but as kids, they were wonderful. They were safety suckers, which means they had a little rope instead of a stick. And you'd suck on that sucker and it droop down and stick all over your hands and get gooey, and you loved it, and your parents were like, just throw it away. But that sucker made everything worth it. And so she got us ready. And we went out to get in the car, and we had an old green Rambler. Now back then, we didn't have car seats for kids. You didn't need them. Because the material on the back seat of that old green Rambler had little pokey things like Velcro. And you threw the kids in the back. And they couldn't move. And she threw us in the back. And she got in and she started that old green Rambler, and we headed down to the Olympus Clinic. Now when we got to the clinic, she opened the back door, she peeled us off the back seat. And we walked to the doors of the clinic. Now one thing you need to know, from this point forward, Mom does not look us in the eye. We opened the doors to the clinic. The odor wafted into our noses. We could smell the formaldehyde that they were keeping all the dead kids in the back in. There were couches in the lobby, little people couches and big people couches. We went over and sat on the little people couch. Mom went over and sat on the big people couch, and she got a magazine and she started to read it. She did not look us in the eye. Me and Dave were doing this. Sweat and swelling. And then we heard it. They were killing a baby in the back. We could hear it screaming. But they didn't kill it. The nurse had carefully wrapped it tightly in a blanket so you couldn't see all the poke holes in it. Me and Dave were doing this now. A nurse came out and said, Erekson. We stood up. We took Mom's hands. She did not look us in the eye. We walked down the hallway, turned the corner, and went into the examining room. The nurse left. Mom sat in the chair. She threw up the magazine. Me and Dave were looking around, and did the door open. And in walked Dr. Giddings. And he had a satellite dish on his forehead. They hadn't been invented back then. But he had a satellite dish on his forehead. And he hit our knees with a little hammer. And he took our temperature. And then he took cotton swabs on the end of sticks. And he left the room with those cotton swabs. He was gone for about 15 minutes. And then he came back in. He said, well, Teddy and Davy, you have strep throat. And then he left. Mom didn't move. She did not look us in the eye. And we sat there wondering what to do. And the door opened again, and in walked another nurse. Follow me. Mom stood up, we took her hands, we followed her down the hallway, and she turned down a dark corridor. And she stopped in that dark corridor at a big metal door. And there was a glass window in the door, and it had chicken wire in it. She unlocked the door. And when she opened the door, there were scratch marks on the inside of the door. Mom went in and sat in the only chair. She threw up the magazine. Me and Dave walked in, and we heard the door close and lock. As we looked around, besides the chair my mom was in, the only other things in the room was a hospital gurney, a bed with the wheels on it. And next to that was a big metal cabinet. And as me and Dave were looking around, we heard the door unlock. And in she walked, Nurse June. I hate the month of June because of Nurse June. She had bright red hair like the flames of hell. She had deep blue eye like the embers of a fire. And she had one of those faces where her lipstick went up, but her face went down. She went over to that big metal cabinet and she opened it and she was fussing in there. We could hear metal and glass clanging. And then she turned like this, like we couldn't see. She had a big metal syringe like they use on cattle. And the needle was this long. And as she turned like this, she looked at me and she said, Teddy, you're first. And what I heard her say as a 4-year-old, she said, now when you go get a shot today at the doctor's, the nurse comes in, she rolls up your sleeve, you go boop, 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 and you're done. Not Nurse June. She wanted a bigger muscle. So, while I was getting ready, she was going to the other side of the room to get a running start. And she ran and she jammed it in, clear to the bone. My eyeballs were up to here. She tried to squeeze it in, but because it was in the bone, she pulled it out just a little bit. And then she moved it around! Why do they move it around? The stuff inside the syringe was thick as honey. I know this for 2 reasons. One, as she's pushing it in, she's making this sound. And 2, as it's going in, my cheek is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When it was all in, she tried to pull it out, but because it was all swollen, she put her foot on my other cheek and she made the sound again. She pulled it out. Blood went everywhere. I looked over at Dave and he had passed out. He didn't even know he got a shot. She carefully reached up and took my little belt and made a tourniquet. As we were walking out, I said, Mom, just a minute, please. I went over to the nurse's station. Can I get my sucker blues? And I had that sucker. It was grape. It was purple. My favorite to this day. And we went out to the car and Mom threw us in the back. And she got in the front. I was right behind her. Her long flowing hair came back behind the seat, and as I ripped my arm up so I could start eating my sucker and it got sticky, I looked at her hair. She didn't look me in the eye. And I reached up with that sucker, and that sucker made everything worth it.